So picture this. It's April 6th, 1990. The Scandinavian Star Ferry is setting off on what's supposed to be a totally routine overnight trip. But for the hundreds of people on board, this trip would turn into one of the absolute worst maritime disasters in Scandinavian history. We're going to break down just how a series of catastrophic failures led to an unimaginable tragedy at sea. That number, that's what this story is really about. 158 men, women, and children lost their lives. But what's truly shocking isn't just how many people died, it's how fast it all happened. 45 minutes, that's it. From the moment the first flame appeared to the point where there was no escape, the entire disaster unfolded in less than an hour. It just begs the question, how on earth could a modern ferry become a death trap so terrifyingly fast? To really get what went wrong, we have to go right back to the beginning. It's the start of the Easter holidays. The Scandinavian Star has just been renovated and it's sailing from Oslo, Norway, over to Denmark, just packed with families and people ready for a vacation. A survivor, Jan Hassam, he remembers the mood on board. He was there with his pregnant wife Christine and their young son, and they were all just looking forward to a holiday. And just like the other 383 passengers, there was this feeling of excitement. You know, the perfect start to a vacation, and the perfect setting for a tragedy nobody saw coming. But here's the thing. Even before the ship had left the dock, the red flags were already there. They left over 2 hours late, passengers could see the renovation work wasn't even finished, staff were disorganized, and, this is crucial, many of the crew couldn't speak the same language as each other, let alone the passengers. And these weren't just little inconveniences, they were serious cracks in the ship's foundation of safety. Okay, so now let's talk about the fire itself. Disasters like this are almost never just one single thing going wrong. They're a chain reaction, like dominoes falling, where one bad decision or one design flaw just cascades into the next. Let's see how that chain was built on the Scandinavian Star. At 2 o'clock in the morning, a fire is deliberately set in a pile of bedding down on an empty passenger deck. For 9 minutes, it just grows, creeping up a stairwell. It isn't until 2:15 a.m., a full 15 minutes after it started, that the captain on the bridge even gets his first warning. 15 minutes. An inferno was just growing completely undetected. And this is the central mystery that baffled investigators. I mean, a small fire in some bedding on a big steel ship, it should have just burned itself out. It needed fuel to grow into the monster it became. So what was the fuel? And the answer is just horrifying. It's this fatal contradiction. The ship's walls were made of fireproof asbestos. Sounds perfectly safe, right? Wrong. They were covered with this thin, decorative lining. And investigators later found that burning just 1 square meter of this stuff was like throwing 1.5 liters of gasoline onto the fire. The fireproofing was totally, completely useless. So you can see how all these failures connected. First, you've got the spark from the arsonist. Second, you've got the fuel from those wall linings. Third, the path. Because the fire alarms were manual, nobody was on deck 3 to set them off, so the fire doors stayed wide open. And fourth, the engine. These powerful ventilation fans for the car deck were left running, which literally sucked the fire and the toxic smoke right up through the ship. It created a perfect, deadly storm. So that's how the fire spread, but believe it or not, that's only half the story. The other half is the desperate, confusing struggle of the people trying to escape. For the passengers on Deck 5, the ship wasn't a ship anymore. It was a maze. It was a trap. Fire safety experts were absolutely horrified by the layout. As Professor Ed Galea explains, to get out of some of these hallways, you actually had to walk toward a dead end and then turn back to find the exit. Now imagine trying to do that in thick, blinding smoke. It's a death sentence. And this is the brutal human reality of that maze. Jan Hassam, escaping with his son, made a right turn in that smoke-filled corridor and found his way out. His wife Christine, just seconds behind him, turned left and walked deeper into the maze. She never made it out. A 50-50 choice became the difference between life and death. But here's the thing, what actually killed most of the victims wasn't the fire itself, but the smoke. Those burning wall linings released this toxic cocktail of carbon monoxide and hydrogen cyanide, the very same gas used in Nazi concentration camps. And that combination is so potent it could knock a person out in just a couple of minutes. Fatal levels were reached on Deck 5 within 8 to 12 minutes of the fire starting. And to make an impossible situation even worse, Many people probably never even heard the warning. Investigators found that in the deadliest part of the ship, the alarm was only about 57 decibels. That's quieter than the ship's own background noise from the engines and ventilation. They literally slept through the one signal that might have saved their lives. The deeper investigators dug, the clearer it all became. This wasn't just a fire. This was a complete institutional failure from top to bottom. The Scandinavian Star was an accident just waiting to happen long before it ever set sail. I mean, the official report is just damning. It reads like a checklist of what not to do. The ship had been rushed into service with only 10 days to get ready. The management didn't conduct a single fire drill, not one. And the crew was a mix of nationalities with no common language, and they were completely untrained for an emergency. They were, as one rescuer put it, absolutely not ready. And for this total cascade of negligence, there was a price. The ship's captain and the owner of the ferry company were both found responsible. They each got 6 months in jail. A pretty clear statement that accountability for this failure started right at the very top. This tragedy sent shockwaves through a region that really prides itself on safety. But out of this horror, real change did happen. The disaster was a key driver in creating new international safety management codes. The lesson of the Scandinavian Star, that all the best equipment in the world is useless without a well-trained crew and responsible management, is now written into maritime law. Those 158 lives lost on the Scandinavian Star led to vital changes in maritime law, making sea travel safer for every single one of us. Their story is a permanent warning. But as new disasters unfold, we're forced to keep asking the same question. Have we truly learned the lessons from that fire at sea?